Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an actor, voice actor, role player, and writer. One of his most popular roles is Commander Shepard from Mass Effect. Please welcome the legendary Mark Meer to Epic Realms. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. How was PAX Australia? You just got back from that. How was that? Tell us about it.
It was fantastic. Had a great time at PAX Australia. There was a bit of a Mass Effect cosplay meetup, and the fans were great. They came out in force. There were a number of great panels that I got to do, and a little bit of Call of Cthulhu. I got to play with the Stream of Chaos folks from Chaosium. So all in all, a great time.
How much do you enjoy Call of Cthulhu in comparison to some of the other RPGs you do?
Oh, I like it a lot. Most RPGs I find tend to be a power fantasy, and Call of Cthulhu is more like a powerlessness fantasy. You're the victim in a horror movie, and the best you can possibly do is ensure that the apocalypse doesn't happen today.
Yeah.
Like you can maybe push it up to next week. And there is something about playing a frail, normal human person in this world of supernatural horrors that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love it. I also love the noir setting that usually takes place in because it's kind of refreshing to me in an RPG. So it's either like a post-apocalyptic world, a superhero world, or like a D&D fantasy type world. So I love Arkham
Mhm.
Horror for that in all of their.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's the traditional setting for the Cthulhu stuff tends to be the 20s, but I actually really started getting into Cthulhu due to a 1940s era
Okay.
game that was a little more noir styled, and it was a LARP actually that we do over in Britain with some friends of ours.
Oh, nice.
Lots of fun, lots of fun.
Yes, indeed. We mentioned in the intro actor, voice actor, and I always want to ask this every time we get somebody who's an actor, voice actor, are those things separate or are they together? Are they is it just actor and then a voice actor is an actor or should they be separated when you introduce someone like yourself?
I mean, I just consider myself an actor, and if you book a voice gig, then you're a voice actor.
Okay.
And if you are in a play at the time, then you're being a theater actor. So yeah, when you don't have a job other than pretending for a living, you tend to take, the work that's available in a variety of mediums. Some people, I guess, do really focus in on one aspect. There are actors who are like, I am a commercial actor, I act in commercials, but
Right.
really, it's more that you're an actor who books commercial gigs and
Right.
yeah, so I think most people tend to would think of themselves as just I am an actor and I happen to work in this particular branch of acting.
Okay. Okay. So you introduced to acting at an early age when you were like a kid or was it just like, hey,
No,
D&D?
no, D&D was my gateway into acting because I went to school in a very small town that did not really have drama as a class in school. I even had to take in high school. I had to take art by correspondence because, again, like they just didn't offer it at my school. So D&D, especially being a dungeon master, was really my first experience in acting, in voice acting, and in improvisation. Because when you're the dungeon master, you have to play all of the characters,
Right.
and improvisation because whatever plan you have will evaporate as soon as it meets the player characters because they can literally do anything they want. So yeah, you're going to have to roll with the punches. So that was my early acting, and when I started doing improv, for example, I did find that actually, the improv skills I was picking up improved I think, my Dungeons and Dragons games.
Yeah, for sure. Was your family supportive of your D&D habit and role
Well,
playing?
I'm an old fella, so I was playing Dungeons and Dragons and starting to play like at the height of the Satanic Panic.
Yeah.
Like I'm basically, the age that the kids are in Stranger Things. I was that age back
Right.
in the 80s. So my parents, they were not, super religious or anything, so they didn't forbid me, but they like all parents, they were wary because this
Right.
panic that was being created in the media, not just about Dungeons and Dragons, but also about heavy metal music and horror movies. And it was like, those are all the things I like. And so they were wary, much in the same ways that, despite the fact that there has never been, hard documented case of poison Halloween candy, for example,
Right. Right.
where it's actually strangers poisoning random kids. It's, there have been incidents, but it's usually someone using that myth to cover up another crime. Uh, parents are still wary about like, oh, okay, we got to. So they were, of course, wary because it was, there was 60 minutes pieces on
Right.
how like, oh, Dungeons and Dragons is a terrible thing, and
Right.
yeah, and of course we all know it was bullshit.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say bullshit on your
You
podcast?
certainly can. You certainly
Okay,
can.
good.
Yeah, that was something I also agreed with. And living same era, I was very much like, no, these are all the benefits. Like it helps with math, it helps with English, it helps with your correspondence and interaction with other people. So I was constantly trying to like tell people that that is not the case. That none of that stuff was right. That it's all, as you said, bullshit. So,
Hmm.
what about? Did that get in the way of anything like school or anything like that growing up? Playing D&D? Did you do too much
Well,
of
no,
it?
I
And
mean, my parents probably wisely sort of used that as that, well, okay, well, unlike others, we won't take away your D&D books and burn them in the backyard, but
yeah,
you got to keep your marks up. And I did. I did
okay,
keep my marks up. Yeah.
that's awesome. So you ended
but
up
but yeah, certainly it was not as accepted as it is today. And I mean, all aspects of nerd culture were not, they were very niche back in
right.
the day. And if you enjoyed that sort of thing, it was not something you broadcast. You kept that quiet unless you wanted to be, outcast. So I was never very good at that. I was always one to fly my flag fairly high. So it's been very gratifying to see not just Dungeons and Dragons, but things like, superheroes and
Yeah,
comic books, and they're the popular things right now.
of the
And of
nerd geek
course,
culture.
these things are cyclical, and eventually there will be, you know, I hope we never go back to the dark days where it's just like you read comics, you play Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah, so it's much better than it was.
Yeah, and I think video games has helped with that as well.
Oh, and video games. Yeah, video games were also at one point seen as like very niche, and like now everybody plays video games,
Right.
even if it's just on their phone.
Yeah, for sure. When did you start getting into actual acting? You did, was it an improv class? Was it college? You mentioned the improv
Uh,
earlier.
my brush with actual acting came when I was in like I think my first year of university. I went to high school in a very small town. I moved to a slightly larger town, Edmonton, a city, and there was a thing called the Teen Festival of the Arts that the local regional theater, the Citadel, used to run, where they would get established writers and directors to essentially put on shows with teens. They would be cast, and in my case, I got into a show called uh, what was it called again? Three Fried Teens in a Baggie. That's right. So there was a local comedy troupe called Three Dead Trolls in a Baggie, and they were doing basically a sketch show with high school kids and young university students in the roles of not just the actors but also the writers of the show. So they suggest, oh, and the reason we couldn't be called Three Dead Teens in a Baggie, it was like, well, we can't say have dead teens in the title, so we have to be called Three Fried Teens in a Baggie. And somehow the administration didn't realize, well, now it's a drug reference, but that's fine.
Right.
So they essentially, I got cast because I did a comic strip at the time in the university paper, and that's what I submitted as my writing examples. It's like, well, I don't write sketches, but I've been writing a weekly comic strip for,
Yeah.
so I could write comedy. And I got accepted. And the Three Dead Trolls in a Baggie, the local comedy troupe, they pointed us all to improv as a great way to generate sketch ideas. I hadn't done any improv in high school.
Yeah.
To me, improv was like, well, I've heard of the like evening at the improv. Isn't that a stand-up thing? And so as soon as I did improv, I loved it. And I started working with Rapid Fire Theater, who was the local improv troupe that did the workshops for us for that show. And after that, I really never looked back.
Yeah.
I decided I do want to pretend for a living, and started booking corporate improv gigs shortly thereafter, and going to auditions, for example, for voice work.
Yeah. What was it about that? Was it the live audience? Was it just the interactions? What was it that you
I
think
think,
really
yeah,
drew
I
you in?
mean, it's all those things. Anyone who's performed live knows that you do get like this, great wave of energy from the audience. And also just pretending, as I say, I'd always be interested in that sort of aspect creatively. And so having that outlet was really, it was such a gift. And when you're an improviser, particularly, you're not just an actor, you're also essentially writing your own thing extemporaneously. And that led to writing, sketches. I was in a sketch troupe for a long time called Gordon's Big Bald Head. done a couple of sketch shows on Canadian television, and really improv was the foundation for my whole career.
Yeah.
Because improv teaches you lessons that can be applied to many branches of acting. But voice acting specifically, it comes in very handy, especially in video game voice acting, because you're often not given the script beforehand. In fact, with video game stuff, it's usually quite secret. So they're not just going to be emailing you
Right.
tomorrow's script. So being able to jump into character immediately and immediately into the situation, and being able to, immediately take feedback and direction from whoever you're working with, those are lessons that improv really teaches you well.
Yeah. How would you define sketch comedy if somebody's never seen a sketch comedy?
Oh, I'd probably point to like the classics, like, well, Saturday Night Live is sketch comedy.
Right.
Monty Python is sketch comedy. SCTV is sketch comedy. The Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
And Kids in the Hall and SCTV especially were very influential on me.
Right.
And Monty Python too, because I've been watching Monty Python since I was a kid.
Yeah,
Since
for
Holy
sure.
Grail.
Well, it's so many really well-known actors, people like Jamie Foxx, comedy, sketch comedy, but his range, those people with such huge range, they're, a lot of those people come from a history of sketch comedy. So
and I'll point to Mr. Bob Odenkirk of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He, of course, had one of my favorite sketch shows of all time, Mr. Show, with David Cross. And I think everyone would agree, he is a fantastic actor.
Yeah, for sure, across the board. When did you kind of start to get into the voice acting? What kind of drew you that direction as opposed to doing more stage stuff? And I know you did other stage stuff and did other improv stuff, but
in fact, I'd say like stage and improv stuff is the majority of what I do, even today. Voice acting gigs come along every now and then, and because I was in the Mass Effect trilogy, people sometimes just call me and say, "Hey, we'd like you to be in this game." So that's always nice. But like anything, as I was saying before, I basically went to an audition. I did find out that BioWare had a presence in Edmonton, or BioWare was based in Edmonton back then, because some friends of mine, again from Three Dead Trolls and a Baggie, that group I mentioned before, and Atomic Improv, essentially the four guys were hired to do all of the voices in one of the early BioWare games, MDK2. And I, heard about that because they said, "Hey, we got this gig," and I was shocked to learn there was a video game company in Edmonton and that they were hiring local actors and improvisers.
Right.
So I, kept my ear to the ground. It's like, oh, if anybody hears about them doing auditions for anything, I'd love to. And I didn't have to wait long, because back in those days, BioWare was doing what they used to call cattle call auditions, where they would just call in, every actor in town, show up at the studio, record a few lines in the booth, and we'll let you know. So I did that, and I got cast in Baldur's Gate 2 way back in the late 90s. And that was great because it was a Dungeons and Dragons game as well. It's like, oh, I get to be in a video game and it's Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
I was very excited for the one line that I had in that game, which was in the final cutscene, which meant you had to play the entire 40 hours to get to my one line.
Right.
But BioWare liked that well enough that they kept hiring me pretty much for every subsequent project. I did more and more on the DLC stuff for the Baldur's Gate things, like Throne of Ball and Shadows on and Throne of Ball. I did Kingmaker. I did Neverwinter Nights. Later stuff I did for them, Jade Empire. I did a lot of demo on the original Knights of the Old Republic. And then by the time Mass Effect rolled around, I've been working with them consistently for a number of years. So I was brought in very early in the whole process to do a presentation to the devs on what typical members of various alien races might sound like. And during that process, I got asked to audition for Commander Shepard, and a few callbacks later, I was told I was going to be the lead.
That's awesome. When you're going through there and you're sourcing in your mind, you're like, okay, this is what this alien would be like. This is what are you coming up with those just spur of the moment, or are you referencing them just from what you thought from other things you've done in the past?
For that particular project, no, that was, as I said, I was brought in on the concept art stage. So, the game had not been written yet. It was all ideas and building the world. So I was given like big binders with dossiers on each of the alien races, like their background. This is what they look like. This is the physical structure of their face. And so I used all of that to base, my various pitches. And sometimes I had multiple. It's like, well, they could be like this, or maybe something like this.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that I did suggest made it into the game. Like I always like to say, I'm the reason the Solarians kind of have the cadence of Steve Buscemi, the very quick way of talking. And some stuff got abandoned, for example, because of their facial structure and just the way their heads were shaped and mouths were shaped. I was suggesting that the Turians might be interesting if they had like a little click sound that they made at the end of sentences or something like that. And then later I was told that got dropped because I made the suggestion long before Garrus was actually in the game as a main character. And so I was told later, it's like, well, there's going to be a Turian who's like a party member. So if that clicking thing is going to get old very quickly with the amount of dialogue he has. So they ended up just using like a filter for all the Turian actors.
Okay.
But some stuff was very obvious. Like the Krogan should have big gruff voices, and the Volus, because of their breathing apparatus, I added that wheeze at the end there. So they did take that suggestion.
How rewarding was that for you creatively wise? I can't even say the word.
That was a ball. It was also like really cool to be in on a game from the ground floor, and it's just like, oh, these are the aliens that are in it. And so I knew a lot of the codec stuff, and getting to, as I say, get in on the ground floor like that on a game was very, very interesting and very cool.
Did you know at the time, or did you have an idea at the time that it would become as big as it did?
I knew that it would be a good game because BioWare made good games, and often quality leads to success. But certainly I wasn't prepared for how embraced it became by all the fans. And I mean, you chalk that up to the great job that BioWare did.
Right, for sure.
And like and video games are such a collaborative art form. So it was like every member of that team, those of us who were doing voice acting, like we get a lot of praise and accolades and love for the fans, from the fans, and we have love for the fans. But as I say, it's a very collaborative thing. So like, from the art to the writing to every aspect of the process.
Yeah. It's been what, 10, 15 plus years? What have you seen?
It's been nearly 20 years since the first Mass Effect, like 17 years now.
17 years. How has the industry changed from when you first started to what it is now? From your perspective.
I mean, I'm very fortunate that I got into this biz right around the time that voice actors really started getting, a lot of respect and recognition. And so being able to go to conventions, obviously, and meet the fans directly, that's been amazing. I mean, that was always there, but I think it really started snowballing around, the early 2000s. So I got in at the right time. Beyond that, one concrete change that I saw just even in the process of recording the trilogy, on the first game, we had paper scripts, and there's so much dialogue. Like the recycling box at the studio was just like stacked this high, and that would just be like week to week. Would just, because there's everybody who's doing recording. By the time we get the second game, we were all doing it on iPads, so we saved many forests, I'm sure.
Yeah. Wow. So you've gotten to play roles in web series, fan shows, animations, shorts that take place in a lot of franchises, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Batman. Are there any of them that you'd like to do on, say, a big screen or like a big TV that really stands out? You're like, man, I'd love to tackle this world or this character from this franchise in like a major movie or TV role.
Let's see. I mean, I am a longtime comic book fan, and so yeah, anything comic book, and I do not discriminate, Marvel or DC. I enjoy both of those universes, and really, I mean, you want to get the gold key guys in there, sure, yeah. Superhero stuff has always been I've been a big fan of. That's
awesome. You did get to play the role of Joker recently. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I did. That was in a fan film, actually, by Creative Force Films. The script was written by Mr. Patrick Logan, a friend of mine that I've done RPG stuff with before. He's actually in Bookshops of Arkham and Graveyards of Arkham with me. And when we were doing the first one, he gave me this script that said he said he knew I was a comic book fan and wanted notes on it. I read it. I thought it was fantastic. I had very few notes, but I did tell him, it's like, listen, if you ever need somebody to play the Joker in this, and he went, that is why I gave you the script. So Yeah, he got me. He hooked me. And so Patrick wrote it, and he was also, this was his first film that he directed.
Okay.
He did a fantastic job. The producers over at Creative Force, that would be Roman Santa Cruz and uh who else was on that? Oh, Chris Burns, of course. Yeah, and they did such a great job on it. I really like the noir feel,
Right.
and getting to play the Joker, that was, as a longtime fan, that was a real draw as well. And my scene partner Jonathan Williams as Gordon, he is amazing,
Yeah.
and such a pleasure to work with.
The
So
interaction you
yeah,
guys had in that film was fantastic. I loved it. And it's
thank you.
very dramatic. Like you could feel, you could cut the tension with a knife between the two
Oh
of you.
yeah,
It was great.
as I say, it's a very dark noir, noirish take. It is shot in black and white brilliantly. We had a great DOP on that, and that is available on YouTube currently for your viewing pleasure. Just under Gordon, a Batman fan film.
Did you have any inspirations when you were playing the Joker from that? Any
Yeah,
other actors or anything like that that inspired
uh,
you, or did you like just want to tweak things, or
no,
straight from the
I will
comics?
say, straight up, my favorite Joker of all time is Mark Hamill from the animated series. So
I heard a little bit of that. That's why I asked. I was like, I
yes,
want to
yes.
know. I want to
I
know.
would say it would be almost impossible for any interpretation that I do of the Joker to not be somewhat influenced by him. But at the same time, I did not want to do an impression of him. I could have
Right.
got way closer to his actual Joker, just so you know. But certainly, I wanted that flavor visually, because we sort of came up with that look together. I definitely wanted to pay a bit of homage to the original Arkham Asylum graphic novel, and in that Joker is almost like a supernatural force of madness
Right.
and evil, and he has those little, just little pinpoint pupils. So I was the one that wanted to bring in those for that look for the
Yeah.
Joker, and thankfully the others agreed, and we got to put that together. And again, that sort of, especially in the early parts, just that sort of unearthly, unnatural quality to the Joker that I wanted to bring in.
Yeah.
But if I say anything more, there may be spoilers for the film. So just go straight to YouTube
Go
and watch
watch it. Go watch it, everybody.
Gordon, a
It's
Batman fan
amazing. It's
film.
fantastic. It won't take up too much of your time, and you won't regret
Nope,
checking that out. I
it
watched it,
is.
and I watch it. I've watched it a few times just because it's I Batman's my favorite comic book character. World Nightwing fan, but
Mm,
watching it was something very special. So amazing
thanks,
job.
Ben. Yeah, it'll only take up 13 minutes of your time. And oh, we recently screened it on DragonCon TV at DragonCon, so I was
Oh,
very happy with that.
nice. How did they take that over there? The audience.
Well, again, it wasn't show. It's on DragonCon TV, so
Oh,
essentially,
oh, I thought you meant like they
drag.
aired it at Dragon. Gotcha.
No,
I
DragonCon
misunderstood.
TV, DragonCon. Well, they did technically, because DragonCon TV is on at in everyone's hotel rooms at DragonCon. There's a channel that's just DragonCon TV, and
Oh,
they do catch ups on panels, they do sketches, they do various things, and later at night they have fan films. So Creative Force Films had Gordon, a Batman fan film, but they also had two of their Star Wars fan films, which are great. They are called Scorekeeper, which is one that was the first one they did, and then their follow up to that was No Disintegrations, which was sort of a Boba Fett solo tale. And I
yeah.
do actually have a little
I was gonna
cameo
say
in that.
you were in that one, weren't you?
I have a tiny but meaningful cameo.
Awesome. Uh, we talked a little bit about D&D earlier, and for the last few years now, you've been doing the actual play RPGs. We mentioned that a little bit with the Chaosium
Mhm.
stuff. How did that kind of get to be where you started doing those as actual plays for whether it's streams or production shows, stuff like that?
Ultimately, I owed all to Beamdog, who did the Baldur's Gate enhanced editions. And they had hired, like, I'd done a lot of voice work for them because I was in the original Baldur's Gates. When they did the enhanced editions, they brought me back as a main party character, a monk named Rasad. And I was also a villain in the mini game, the Black Pits, called Baloth Baratil, who, spoiler, he does eventually become available as a party character as well. And I had a great time with Baloth. He's evil drow sorcerer, lots of fun to play. And I've subsequently played him in a lot of live events. And he's got a magic card now. He's an official Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
So yeah, it's very nice. And he's been in Idle Champions of Forgotten Realms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's had a life. He's had a life. So Beamdog took me down to D&D Live in 2018, the stream of many eyes. And I was playing Alveus Malcantor, the world's greatest first level mage, who was a character that I'd done for Beamdog in their web series, which was, I think it was based around probably Neverwinter Nights or one of their games. But the idea was that Alveus was a first level mage who never bothered to level up because he knew all the great cheats and tricks for surviving in these games.
Right.
So he as a character was basically a first level magic user who just had every magic item ever and would just have a bunch of people around him as meat shields to take all the damage. And so that was the character that I played down at D&D Live. Had a great time and met so many fantastic people. I got to meet B. Dave Walters there for the very first time, Erika Ishii, and a lot of people that I would end up doing streams with.
Yeah.
So because of that meeting with B. Dave, we got to be friends. And when it came time for Wizards to do their Ravenloft stream, which was called the Black Dice Society. He knew I was a huge Ravenloft fan, so he said I was one of the first people he called, and I got to play not only a player character in that, the party cleric, Brother Uriah, but I also got to play an NPC, one of my favorite D&D villains, the Lich, Aslan Rex.
Okay.
And I would do that, like, we were just doing it by Zoom, but I would be in like full Lich prosthetics for all of his bits, and that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And of course, prior to that, like again, a lot of the folks that I'd met at D&D Live invited me to various events. The Library Bards, for example, Xander Genere and Bonnie Gordon, they were the first ones to invite me to D&D in a Castle, which is an event over in the UK, which is what it sounds like. It's Dungeons and Dragons played in a castle. And I've been one of their guest dungeon masters since 2019. Great bunch of folks. And yeah, so really it all stemmed from that one event, D&D Live in 2018. Met all these folks. I met a bunch of them again at Gen Con that year, and they just started inviting me on their streams. I don't actually stream myself. I do not have a channel. I'm not very technically proficient, so it's very easy for me to join a Zoom call and just play D&D with folks.
Yeah.
But somebody else has to build it, and then I will come. And in this case, B. Dave had put this together with Wizards of the Coast. I had a great time. Got to meet a bunch of excellent folks that I played with subsequently. Nora Ibrahim, for example, was in that, and Sage Ryan. And I've played. Sage was a player in Bookshops of Arkham, and Nora was a player in Graveyards of Arkham.
Yeah, let's talk about those shows. How did the Arkham stuff come to be? It was a Kickstarter to begin with, if I'm not wrong, right?
That was for the second one. The first one, that was put together by Elder Eye Entertainment down in Atlanta. That was Dustin Fletcher and Devin. They did D4 previously, as they sort of did like a co-DM, tag team DM Dungeons and Dragons show. And I'd been on that show as a guest NPC and knew them from Dragon Con as well, like from before that. And they put together this thing, Bookshops of Arkham, which was the initial show, and brought Chaosium on board and Roll20, and had a great time. Patrick Logan, as I mentioned, was one of the cast members in that, and also Sage Ryan. So we played that. It was very well received, that first one. And I should mention that both Bookshops of Arkham and Graveyards of Arkham are co-written by my wife, Belinda Cornish.
Oh, awesome.
Mm-hmm. So after the success of the first one, Chaosium put together the Kickstarter for Graveyards of Arkham, and we did that one with Good Time Society in Los Angeles. That is, of course, Becca Scott's studio, and she was also in Black Dice Society. So it's just, again, this web of friendships and acquaintances that all comes together. That one just went up on YouTube this year, earlier, and also is being quite well received. So hopefully we will get to do more of those in the future.
How did they put together production from something like that? Because you're role playing, because there's a lot of people, ourselves included, that do a stream of a role playing, and it's just a normal role playing session. But you guys have production quality on there. You have cameras, you have the costumes. So running a game, right? You're still running the GM role, the storyteller role, the keeper role. But how does it differentiate from just sitting at a table with friends, aside from just the production, for you as a person running the game?
Well, yeah, as you say, both Bookshops of Arkham and Graveyards of Arkham, it was much more of an affair than like even Black Dice Society. Like Black Dice Society was being done for Wizards of the Coast and
Hmm.
was an official Dungeons and Dragons stream, but it was really just putting on a costume and joining a Zoom meeting. But
Right.
with Graveyards and Bookshops, both of them were full on shoots. So we had a set, we were in period costume, we had actors coming in as NPCs. Like some of the NPCs I played, but some of the NPCs were just completely realized in by actors.
Yeah.
So that actually took a lot of pressure off me because I didn't have to be everybody.
Right.
And it also made scenes where NPCs had to talk to each other much more than just me having a conversation with myself. And we had an array of great NPCs in both of those storylines. So they really added a lot. Ultimately, the difference between just running, so you've got actors coming in as NPCs. That's, I'd say, a big difference to
Right.
just running a home game. The other thing would be on occasion, it would just be, oh, we have to redo that bit because we lost sound.
Right.
So, yeah. So you might spring something on the player characters, and then it's like, okay, we're gonna have to go back and do that. It's like, oh, okay, well, they know what's coming, but let's just do it again. Some things again, like it would usually be having to pause for technical issues. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we wouldn't have to redo something. It would just be like, okay, we're gonna pause because we're starting to lose that light, so
Yeah.
we'll
Restroom
fix
break.
that.
Let's go.
Restroom breaks. I mean, hopefully you do have restroom breaks in your home game as well,
Right.
because otherwise I don't think the home game is going to be very
But you know
enjoyable.
about it the home game when you're watching the show. You don't see, it's a 2 hour long show. You don't see him. I got to go to the bathroom right now. Let's go.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, we had designated break times.
Yeah. What was it like to sit on the set and basically run a game? Because it's a full set. You've got people there.
Mhm.
Is that
Well,
is that add to it or does that take away from it?
I don't know because I've run games at conventions before, and so there you're playing in front of an audience,
Hmm.
but at the same time you are, there is an audience watching, and you're doing a show essentially, but you're also doing, especially as a game master, you're presenting a game for these people, for your players, so
Right.
that part doesn't change.
How about the editing? How do you know what the editing process for that ended up being like in the end? Like,
Oh,
did you
no,
shoot?
I
Did you
I
shoot
have
like
no.
5 hours and then it got cut down into two, or shoot for 3 days and it gets cut down into an episode?
Well, I think it's mostly like all the time, all the pause time gets cut out.
Okay.
And they do, of course. I was really pleased with the music, especially in Graveyards, that they put in. But for the most part, no, it's not like they cut out entire sections.
Okay.
We we did like, I think, 6 episodes for Graveyards. So like I think we used pretty much everything that we did. Sadly, on Bookshops, the initial one, there was a terrible incident with sound, and we basically lost sound for an entire episode. And I was so disappointed because it had such fantastic performances by the cast in that particular episode. It was a real showcase for them. So sadly, our stopgap approach, our fix that we came up with was we had basically the logs. We knew what happened in it, so I just did a audio recap, and we had some visual footage. So I just did an audio recap of what happened in that episode, and thankfully, those that were watching were understanding about that, and of course, regretful that they didn't get to see that
Yeah.
particular episode, but they were able to pick it up with the subsequent ones. And thankfully, we had no such snafus in Graveyards of Arkham, so you can watch that one entirely
In its
and not have to
entirety.
worry. Yes, you don't have to worry about the any pickups.
I don't know if you're able to talk on it or not, but are there talks to do more?
I do know that next year is Chaosium's big 50th anniversary, so I suspect they're not going to. They've got a lot of celebrations going on. They probably don't quite have the budget for a supplemental video, production, because again, it's a fairly major production.
Right.
But I think things look positive for something in the future. Perhaps not in 2025, but in the future.
That's hopeful. I know a lot of people really love Arkham and um, they liked seeing that because it was an alternative to a lot of the D&D produced things that are out there, the Dimension 20 and the Critical Role, and people just, from what I've heard from the people that I've talked to and the people I know personally, they ate that show up because they loved it. They loved that it was different. It was something new and fresh, refreshing for all of them. So
Yes. Yeah. So hopefully in the future more. And of course, Graveyards came out specifically to promote the Arkham source book, which Chaosium released, which is excellent, by the way. As a player and a fan, I really enjoyed that book. And we got access to it early,
Oh,
which was really
nice.
nice. It was like, oh, months before anybody else, we had the PDFs. With Chaosium's permission and NDAs and everything.
Yeah,
But we used it to create the Graveyard storyline and the game. And I actually just got to play, as I mentioned, with the Stream of Chaos, a scenario called Bits and Pieces. I was not the keeper. I was the player for that, which was
okay.
very enjoyable, and they did a great job. But Bits and Pieces is in a new release from Chaosium called No Time to Scream, which coincidentally releases this week.
That's awesome. Sorry, I had a little cough there. I had to mute myself.
That's all right.
Uh, Recently, speaking of the actual play stuff, recently you did a convention, as you've done some tabletop role playing at conventions, but you did one with the Baldur's Gate 3 cast as well. How was that for you to get to hook up with those guys, being somebody who was on earlier renditions of Baldur's Gate and then getting to hang out and basically GM all of this new voice cast?
They were fantastic. They were such a great group. We played a very brief game at Dragon Con, but I did actually get to do a different panel with Neil earlier in the convention, the Twisted Tunes panel, where they basically get a bunch of voice actors and give us scripts, and they just sort of like, okay, you're going to do this part as this character you played. You're going to do this part as this impression that I know you can do. And at Dragon Con, we did the Lion King script, which was a lot of fun. It was very fun. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's great.
thanks to Jeff Zanini, as always, for having me on Twisted Tunes. And so yes, I did get to meet Neil before we actually all sat down at the table with the rest of the cast of Baldur's Gate 3. And we had a ball. They were very funny, very charming, and the audience, I have to say, loved it. I think we filled the biggest room that they have at Dragon Con, and the audience was adoring. And that is also available for viewing, the game, and I think Twisted Tunes as well,
Yeah,
on the Twisted Tunes channel on YouTube.
that's awesome. Hopefully people can go and find that, and hopefully they're clamoring for more, and we can get some more of that of you guys, because everything I saw from that, I was just like, this is awesome. Let's make this the new actual play. This group right here.
I'd be delighted.
Tell us a little bit about MythForce. You and I chatted about it before we started.
Mm.
Tell us a little bit about that game, because I want to talk about that because it looks super cool and it's a fairly recent game.
Yes, and it's constantly getting updated.
Mm-hmm.
That is from Beamdog as well, the folks I mentioned earlier. They essentially made a game that is based on a 1980s Saturday morning cartoon that never existed. And it looks like a mashup between Dragon's Lair and the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, and a little bit of Thundercats and Masters of the Universe in there, with a fantastic 80s theme song that you have to hear to believe.
Yeah, it's great.
And the gameplay, again, it looks like you're playing an old Saturday morning cartoon. And visually, the graphics look like that as well. I play the Skeletor of said cartoon, if you will, or the Venger, Daedalus, a vampire lord who is like the main evil boss, and he is of course, the last guy that you have to beat in the game. But he has various henchmen that you have to work your way through, and it's a roguelite. It's like a dungeon crawl, basically.
It looks amazing. It looks great. Every time I see a commercial for it or a video for it, I'm like, this looks so great. This looks so fun. And being a kid from the 80s, I have to automatically be attracted to a game like that. So, do you have any other upcoming projects coming up? I know you just did the Dextero Voice Challenge, right? The voice
I
actor
did.
challenge.
Yes, that was in conjunction with my appearance at PAX Australia. Uh, Basically, they have a show called, I believe it's Fall Damage.
Okay.
I think so. Anyway, they have started that recently, where they get actors, voice actors on, and they see if they can remember their iconic lines from video. Like, they'll say the first part of the line and you have to finish it, or who are you talking to, or who's
Yeah.
saying this line. And I knew that my friends Jason Charles Miller had done it before. He's, of course, does Halo stuff, and Matt Mercer, speaking of Critical Role, had done that before. So I sort of was like, well, I hope I can at least match them. And Matt was like second on the leaderboard, so it's like, okay, well, hopefully I can at least match Jason. And to my great surprise, I ended up being at the top of the leaderboard. I
I was going to see,
I'm
did you fail any of them?
there are a few, and I
Okay.
think they were being nice to me because there were a couple they gave me partial credit on, which they didn't have to do that, so thank you. I do appreciate it. But yeah, I was glad that I didn't embarrass myself, but to actually get to the top of the leaderboard, that is very gratifying.
Yeah. Doing all these conventions, you're always on your social media posting, pictures of cosplays and
Mhm.
outfits. What is your favorite part about going to the conventions?
Yeah, it's seeing the creativity of the fans, to be honest, especially with the Mass Effect stuff in particular, like seeing the cosplay, the art, the stuff that people come up with. It's amazing. Swag, I've been gifted like excellent swag that's like, this looks mass produced, but no, just a little bespoke piece of swag. Uh, their creativity always floors me. And I'm a big cosplay fan. I do it myself. So yeah, I'd say cosplay and buying stuff for my collection. Those those tend to be what I look forward to cons
Do you have any
for.
cosplays coming up that you want to do that you haven't gotten to do yet? That you're like, I'm going to do this. This is going to
Hmm.
happen at some point.
I mean, I have done Doctor Doom in the past, but I think I want to revamp him. In fact, if I wanted to, I would have to because the armor that I is probably not in great repair right now. That was from years and years ago. Let's see. I do have one. I've got most of the elements for it, but I've never actually worn it at a con. Are you familiar with the character Bat Zaro?
That sounds familiar, but no, I'm going to say
He's
no.
basic. Do you know Bizarro?
Yes, yes.
So
Oh
what
yeah.
Bizarro
Okay.
what Bizarro is to Superman, Bat
Yeah,
Zaro is to
Batizaro to Batman.
Batman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he's hard to figure out because he doesn't actually have eyes. Like his mask doesn't have eye holes at all. So yeah.
You'll have to
I
get like
think
that mesh.
I've got something that I think will work. It's not precisely comic accurate, but I think it'll work out. And yeah, so I've always got a few on my list that I want to do. And
Awesome.
I do Fallout cosplay, and with the thing with Fallout cosplay is you can always be modifying it and adding new bits and bits of armor and things like that. And of course, you can be from different vaults and different franchises. Like I had done Fallout 4 cosplay before. I've done 76 cosplay, and just this year at Dragon Con, I did I guess Fallout TV show cosplay, although not something directly from the TV show.
Yeah.
I had a Vault 33 suit, which my friend Miracle actually weathered very nicely for me, and I had various accessories, and I had a ghoul mask, so I was like a Vault 33 ghoul. So he was an original character really, and I got to host the Dragon Con parade as him this year as well.
That's great. I love every time I see you do stuff from the different conventions and the parts that you partake in them. It's just always fun to see you keeping up with that stuff and posting that. It kind of like lets us see the convention through your eyes. And I always not everybody does that, and the people that do not as much as you do. So
Oh well, thanks,
I
man. Thank you.
appreciate that.
I am just a nerd who got a gig and now gets to go to now gets to go to cons for free.
Yeah, that's awesome. Talking about role playing, I always ask this question: do you prefer to be a player or a game master?
It would depend on my mood at the time.
Okay.
Early in my role playing career, I had to be a forever DM when all the older kids that I'd started playing with, they all, they were just like, we don't play this anymore. So I realized if I wanted to ever play Dungeons and Dragons again in my small town, I would have to, number one, teach people how to play Dungeons and Dragons, and two, then always be the dungeon master. And so for many, it seemed like many years, for a couple of years, which seems like forever when you're, in junior high school, uh, I had to just DM. So any chance that I got to play, I would leap at. More recently, I didn't really have time to DM. So especially when I was like touring or things like that. Improv companies I find usually have players that all play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
The Venn diagram is a circle of improvisers and nerds. So there's usually, even if you're out of town at a different improv company, there'll be some people who play Dungeons and Dragons. So often I would drop into people's Dungeons and Dragons just as an NPC or as a player for a night. And so I hadn't DM'd properly in quite some time. But then when things like D&D in a castle came along, it's like, oh, I can finally, those ideas I've had for campaigns, I can actually flesh them out, and I'll have definitely a captive audience, because at those things, people are very invested in the game. So it's always great to play with players who are there's nobody on their phones at those tables, man. They're all,
That's great.
everybody is fully invested in the storyline that you're all creating together.
Yeah, when we were discussing planning having you come on the show, we were working around some of the D&D in a castle, and I was like, that is just so cool. Yeah, I'm in. You know, if I ever get over there, I'm in for a D&D in the castle for sure. You also did Pod by Night for Vampire the Masquerade. You want to tell us a little bit about that? Let people know what that is.
That is a Vampire the Masquerade podcast that is put out by the overarching company is Pod by Night, and I've done 2 storylines. One was Stitch of Fate, which we started during the pandemic, and the more recent one is Cracked Crown. In both of those, I play a Nosferatu named Max, who I really enjoy playing as a character. And Jason Charles Miller is actually in Cracked Crown with me. He's playing an excellent Toreador, I should say. I mean, I played Vampire back in the day, of course, way back. I date myself in the
way
90s.
Back before they redid it for the modern version.
But my introduction to the more recent editions of Vampire was guesting on LA by Night. Jason Carl, their storyteller, invited me to come play with them, and man, he is a great storyteller, and he gave me such a great character to play in that. Chaz Price, who was the sire of one of the player characters. And yeah, I didn't have to do much for everyone to instantly become the villain everyone loved to hate, because Jason had just drawn him so well, so he was very easy to play.
That's great.
And so, yeah, that re-sparked my interest in Vampire the Masquerade. And we've been doing, as I say, we started during the pandemic, and we still do a little weekly meeting. Sometimes it's difficult because we all have conventions and stuff to go to. But yeah, we put that out. And yeah, Pod by Night, Stitch of Fate, Cracked Crown, that should be available wherever you find your podcasts.
That's also fantastic. We've got some upcoming appearances. We've mentioned a couple times, we've teased a little bit D&D in the Castle. October 28th, November 1st, and then November 4th through the 8th. I think those are sold out currently.
Yes, yeah, those have been sold out for quite a while, yes.
Yeah.
I will be doing my Halloween campaign because we're actually going to be there over Halloween in a haunted castle in England, so that's pretty fun. But I am going to be doing their spring rounds as well, and I think there might be some tickets available left for those. That's going to be in late March, early April. And if you just go to dndinacastle.com, you can find out when exactly that is, because I don't have it in front of me. But you can also see if there's space left at my table.
Yeah, I've got March 24th through the 28th, and then March 30th through April 3rd from their website.
That sounds like it is correct.
I try to do a little bit of research, just a little bit.
Thank you, more than me, clearly.
You're also going to be in London for the Mass Effect board game release in November 12th.
Yes, at the end of my stay up in Newcastle for Dungeons and Dragons in D&D in a Castle, I'm going to be going down to London, and I got to see the new Mass Effect board game at Gen Con this year. It looks great, and the minis are fantastic. I think they did put out, and I think I shared it, some pictures of the painted versions, which just look amazing. The guy they got doing that does a great job. But I look forward to actually, I didn't actually get to demo. I dropped by their booth and I took pictures and looked at the game, but I didn't actually get to sit down and play. So I think I'm going to actually get to do that during my time in London.
That'll be great. I hope you have a blast with that. I love board games. I just love board games. We have a lot of board game designers on here, and I can't get enough of them. So you're also going to be at SAC Anime January 3rd through the 5th at Sacramento, California.
That is correct. That is a little mini Mass Effect reunion. So we've got a number of folks from the games. I know Courtney Taylor's going to be there, and DC Douglas, and let's see, I think Ali Hillis and Ash Sroka. So yeah, looking forward to seeing all of them again.
That's going to be great. Do you have any other events coming up that we haven't mentioned?
There are some further in the future, but I don't think have been announced yet, so I'll keep a lid on that.
Okay, sounds good.
And of course, there's always like, there's that game I did recorded for, but I don't think anyone has said anything about that yet, so neither can I.
So we'll just go like this and do the shush symbol over our mouth. They can find you on social media on X/Twitter at Mark_Meer, Instagram at Mr.MarkMeer, correct?
Yeah, Mr.Mark Meer. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have unified social media handles.
That's all right. That's all right.
I'm on Threads, of course, as well, under the same one as Instagram, because they made it easy. I mean, Blue Sky and Mastodon they're just that one step too complicated for me. Like, I just went to Threads.
Right, right. I'll be there soon eventually as well. People can also find you on Cameo, right? Cameo / Mark Meer.
I am available on Cameo for all your Mass Effect catchphrase related needs. And and I should mention, with N7 Day coming up, I believe I'm going to be opening my Streamly store. So I'll be at D&D in a castle during it. So I'll open it up the week of N7 Day, probably just after Halloween.
Okay.
And you'll be able to sign up, and I will send you autographed prints of Mass Effect. And I'll probably keep it open because I'll be in the UK for a while. So I'll open it up the week of N7 Day, and I'll probably keep it open until I return in mid-November and do my actual signing of all of them shortly thereafter. We do it live on Instagram, so it'll be on my IG live, and you'll watch me sign it, and I'll hold it up, and you'll have proof that I actually signed it.
Yeah, yeah. Then you can be like, yeah, this is it. You don't need the certificate stuff when people do things and all that. So it'll be awesome to watch those. I've seen a few of those, and they've always been a lot of fun to just watch and see the little interaction and all of the stuff that goes on with it. So you'll have a blast with that, I'm sure. Again, everybody, that'll be Streamily. You just look for Mark Meer on there; they'll have it on there. Coming up on Epic Realms, November 4th, we're gonna have Leanne Merciel. She's a fantasy author who has written for Paizo's Pathfinder Tales, written Warhammer, Dragon Age novels. She's going to be doing the first in the new series of books from Paizo's new Pathfinder novels. Again, she's going to be joining us November 4th. That podcast will be on November 5th. Also, still to come down the road, Shadowrun and Battletech author Jennifer Brozak, game designer Scott Rogers, and returning guest New York Times bestselling author Kevin Hearn is going to be returning to Epic Realms. So please rate, review, follow, subscribe, and share this episode with all of your friends. For Mark Meer, I am Nick, and I want to thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.
I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite podcast on the Citadel. I should go.